the county electrical inspector, and he said, oh yeah, I know that building. That building has a long history of violations. In fact, the previous manager prior to Akbar's acquisition had prevented samples from entering units with very faulty and dangerous wiring. So there has been a long history of mismanagement of this building. Mr. Akbar is new to this property, and that's a part of why I was willing to give him a chance that he could bring it up and make up for the years and years of neglect that have been poured into this building. The day that Akbar asked me to be his temporary manager, I was threatened by an unprofessional fellow named Bob Dunnigan, who, as it turns out, has a long history as a meth dealer and heavy sentencing on that. He told me if I reported the irregularities that he was reporting to me, he knows where I live. I took that as a deliberate threat to my safety. Then he doubled down on it and said, yeah, and George, your partner, can beat you up if you move forward with complaining. But it was kind of a strange situation because I think Dunnigan was a whistleblower, but he was also an enforcer who was threatening me. He wanted to tell me everything. So there's sewage pumping under the building, seeping in through the foundation. There are cracked sewage pipes. There are vented sewage pipes. Sewage blast is coming into the apartment. And the only reason you might not notice it is because there's so much marijuana smoke from all the other neighbors. And I originally thought, oh, it's a little minor thing. Or if I put some magazines at this hole in the wall behind the toilet, I can block the smell of sewage. But the fact of the matter is that the length of my tenancy, we were forced to breathe toxic, noxious air. My partner was facing multiple surgeries, which require cleanliness and a hygiene antibacterial standpoint. You don't enter surgery and stay in a building that might be contaminated with airborne toxins and E. coli and whatnot. I first began contacting the police department when we had a very severe incident with a drug-affiliated guy who's a downstairs neighbor, harassed George, and then chased George up the stairs. So we were on the upstairs of this apartment. He's stomping up the stairs, screaming, I'm going to beat you up, that kind of stuff. When I got on the phone with Akbar after contacting the main manager, I said, well, I've talked to Officer Brown. We can't be threatened physically living here. This is just too much. This man probably had a vendetta on me from a previous problem where I had lived at a problem property. I was a whistleblower to Seaside Rentals, so therefore he had a vendetta on me and decided to make my tenancy pure hell. And that includes that if I go to the refrigerator, there's a man with either a broomstick, a shotgun, or a shovel jamming the floor underneath my feet to cause me to jump. And these are very creaky, wobbly floors. What my standpoint was too is I'm going to move in here and I always leave something cleaner than when I found it. So I went to work trying to clean the slime and sludge off the ceiling from years and years of pot smoke. I worked in the dust. I worked on the black mold in the bathroom. But by April, when I was becoming the manager, there were numerous entrances in and out of my building, including the diminution of our safety with the removal of one lock, our secondary lock in early March. And that a part of the premise of this lawsuit, just for the record, is 90.375. I felt that, well, it could be a larger civil habitability lawsuit if we had appropriate counsel. It is important that landlords recognize that the law provides penalties for diminution of services. So our diminution of services included numerous reductions of electricity. What I found out, which was bizarre to me at the time, is I was expected to have a copy of a key of a neighbor, enter her apartment when she's at work to flip a breaker box. But that would involve, if I have a computer and a tea kettle and a refrigerator that is overloading the circuit, all my power can go off. Everything I'm writing for professional reasons is now destroyed or zapped out. I was extremely worried the whole time we were there that my property would be destroyed. By the time I get the inspectors in there, April 11th, that's when things were getting really dicey. I've been threatened by Dunnigan with physical violence. I'm living in fear. We get a hand-delivered knock at the door from Bob Mitchell, who, as it turns out, has assessed some pretty heavy penalties on this building. I found out 2 days ago. So I get hand-delivered this habitability issue, which addresses the sewage pipes and the electricity.
And who is Bob Mitchell?
He's the city inspector for Public Works in Seaside.
Okay.
And he wanted me to know that there was a threat that power may be turned off in 14 days if the landlord did not comply with an abatement schedule. And that was tremendous. My next step was to immediately get a storage unit and put as much of my electronics and hard drives and personal files in safety in Gerhardt, because I was scared of the threats of violence. I was scared of the shocks to my feet when the power surged. I was scared for my loved one's safety, scared for my property's safety, and unable to complete a course of physical therapy that I had got registered for. I had to discontinue medical care to deal with this ongoing and never-ending crisis. What happened with Akbar is by the time he opens his letter from the April 15th issuance of this nuisance, I'll provide you a copy with my Exhibit 3, and then Exhibit 1 and 2 are the destroyed cell phones, which happened after the filing of the suit. If you want to toss them out, that's fine, I don't care. But when Akbar got a copy of this, he called me and told me I had to leave in 10 days, which I believe is completely unlawful retaliation for legitimate concerns regarding health and safety. And what was also deceptive to me is I had put an email to Leslie Vipon, the manager at the time, and Mohammed Akbar at his operational intel email from which he had induced me into this fraudulent housing scheme, saying, I'm contacting the fire department because no one's taking this electricity problem seriously, and I'm terrified of the shocks. I didn't like being shocked by the electricity in this building. So I thought, well, maybe he didn't get that email. Maybe he's really busy and he didn't pay attention, because when he asked me to be the manager of the building, I took that very seriously. And I realized that if there were liability concerns that were going to lead to disabled, low-income people being burned alive, when there's a very serious fire hazard, including fire shooting out of sockets, burnt electrical fixtures where the prongs become shattered in charcoal and dust, I felt that me being in any kind of quasi or temporary management role put even more burden of responsibility to me in a respondeat superior way, that I have more responsibility than a normal tenant. When he got down to the retaliation, that was April 19th. Fortunately, another hearing for which I was scheduled had been postponed so I could deal with Mr. Akbar's crisis, which involved this outraged phone call in which he said, if I want safety in a kitchen, go elsewhere, because we were expected to live with no kitchen